Zach is back. It's the Zach Gelb Show on Fox Sports 920 The Jersey.
Welcome back in, Zach Gelb Show from the Princeton Orthopedic Associates Studios. Time right now in our studios, 4:41 on a football Friday. A lot of Eagles and Seahawks talk. Now let's get to the other team we cover here in New Jersey, and that's the New York Football Giants. Giants looking to go 7-3 and inch their way closer to getting back to the playoffs for the first time in 4 years. Now joining us is the man that's coming to New Jersey this weekend for a game at MetLife Stadium up the Turnpike as the Bears sideline reporter, and that's Zach Zaidman, who's kind enough to join us right now on the show. Zach, appreciate a few minutes, and how are you?
I'm fantastic, Zach. How you doing?
Well, I'm doing great, and I appreciate you giving us a few minutes today. So Alshon Jeffery was someone's name that was floated around here at the trade deadline that we maybe thought was coming to Philadelphia. Now the Giants and the Bears get ready to play on Sunday, but Alshon Jeffery won't be with the team from the suspension. Just what's been the reaction? Because I was shocked when I heard the news about Alshon Jeffery.
Yeah, you said it. I think the key word is everyone's stunned in Chicago, and I think probably around the league as well, because there's a lot of money at stake. Alshon Jeffery's playing this season under the franchise tag tender, so he's losing in excess of $3 million just for missing the next 4 games, and then you don't know how it's going to affect him financially at the end of the season when he hits the market. Very valuable player. He's the kind of player that attracts a double team from an opposing defense. So it'll be real interesting to see how the Giants go about attacking the Bears' defense now, and whether or not that affects the Bears' running game, which is the staple of what they do best. Jordan Howard, the rookie out of Indiana, is having a really good year that I think we would pay more attention to if Ezekiel Elliott wasn't doing what he's doing out in Dallas, and if the Bears had a better record than the 2-7 record that they're coming into the MetLife Stadium with.
We know, like you're saying, the Bears are going to want to run the ball, which could be tough against this Giants defense. But let's get back to Alshon Jeffery. You need to try to replace his production, and that's going to be tough to do with just how dominant of a player he is. Who do the Bears lean on at wide receiver to try to step up in the absence of Alshon Jeffery?
Well, it's not just Jeffrey that's missing. It's also their first-round pick from 2015, Kevin White, the stud out of West Virginia, is on IR. So they've got a whole bunch of receivers banged up. Eddie Royal has been dealing with a toe throughout most of this season that's affected him. So they're relying on some inexperienced wide receivers, including a former quarterback at Illinois State, Cameron Meredith, who was flashed. Last week he was on the receiving end of a Hail Mary from Jay Cutler that led to the Bears' only touchdown of the game in a loss to the Buccaneers. They also have activated a guy by the name of Marquise Wilson, former receiver at Washington State, who has had glimpses and flashes with the Bears. He's off the PUP list after a foot injury, so he'll be added to the mix as well. But the Bears thin a receiver, and I got to go back to that running game, because without it, the Bears don't have a semblance of an offense. Yes, they'll use Zach Miller, their tight end, as a receiver, but ultimately, Alshon Jeffery is the guy who makes that passing game go, and without him, the Bears are somewhat depleted, because we haven't even started to talk about the offensive line, where the Bears will be using probably a bunch of backups on the right side. Kyle Long placed on injured reserve. He's the Bears' best offensive lineman, and their right tackle, Bobby Massey, is doubtful as he recovers from a concussion.
This is not a dominant Giants defense, but it's a defense that is playing a lot of good football, especially in the back end with the secondary. And even up front, the linebackers are a little bit of a cause for concern, but that defensive line has had a nice stout presence. So you're talking about bad offensive line play. You have a good running back. How do you think the Bears fare this weekend? It doesn't sound that positive for their offense right now, even going up against this Giants defense, which is good but not great.
It's good but not great, but nevertheless they do have some guys up front, as you mentioned. You still have JPP who exists. You still have some big guys in the middle who can help you stop running the ball. So I think for the Bears to have a chance in this game, the key for them, as it has been all season with all the different injuries that they've been dealing with, the key for them is to play complementary football, which means you got to make sure your defense gets some rest. How do you do that? You run the ball. You got to prevent the Giants And that offense, which is top 10 in terms of passing, all those terrific receivers that the Giants can put on the field, you got to take them off the field. How do you do it? By running the football. And that's why, from the get-go, even with the loss of Alshon Jeffery, that's something that I brought up. But, again, now that you don't have that threat deep that you're worried about with the Bears, you figure the Giants will adjust and add some extra depth in terms of putting guys in the box to try and stop the Bears from running the ball.
Zach Zaidman with us right now, Bears sideline reporter. Zach, there was an article this week released by Mike Freeman, talked about how he's heard from some players that they've given up on Jay Cutler. What's the validity to that report from things that you're hearing?
You know, I'm not going to doubt Mike Freeman, but I think it's important to mention that he talked to two players. And I think, and Zach, you've been in NFL locker rooms, you've spoken to many players. I don't think you can ever say that one player or two players speak for the 51 other guys in that locker room. So Jay Cutler had a horrible performance last week against the Buccaneers, himself responsible for 4 turnovers and including a pick 6. So it was not a good game. But the week before, on national television, everyone saw the good Jay Cutler when they were able to go out and beat the Minnesota Vikings, and his own coaches, his own players were talking about how he deserved a lot of credit for that victory. And he was the guy that gave a pregame speech prior to that victory over Minnesota in which he deserved a lot of credit. So I think anytime you talk to guys in a locker room after a really bad loss, you might get that, but I just don't see it. You know, in my vantage point from the sideline, Zach, after the pick 6 that was thrown last week in which Chris Conte returned an interception for a touchdown, the leaders of that defense, Danny Trevathan and Jarrell Freeman, the inside linebackers of the Bears, went over to the offensive guys, including Cutler and Alshon Jeffery, and they said, you know, we got your back. Just forget about it. We'll pick you up. Just start fresh. Well, that doesn't happen if you have a team where guys don't get along. So that's why I'm not buying that report. I'm not saying that the players that Mike Freeman talked to are lying. I just think that those players can't speak for the entire locker room.
Well, you know the fans of Chicago are frustrated, and I'm sure there's some players in that locker room that are frustrated with the failures that are happening, the up and down play from the offense. Jay Cutler's always been an interesting person to me and a lot of people that watch the National Football League. I thought he got a lot of unfair criticism in that championship game when he had to go out because of the injury. People questioned his toughness. Just as someone that gets to interact with this guy a lot, being the sideline reporter for the Bears, how do you describe Jay Cutler?
I think Cutler's an easy target. Let's start off with that. Just go back to when he became a Bear and he forced his way out of Denver. And I think that there were a lot of players around the league that were not happy. Now, Cutler has been the beneficiary of 3 mega contracts over his NFL career. There was the initial contract that he got being a first-round pick of the Broncos prior to them changing the CBA to what it is right now. And that's when players used to get a lot of money if you were picked in the first round. Then he gets the trade to Chicago after Josh McDaniels took over in Denver. And remember what the Bears gave up to get 2 first-round picks, a starting NFL quarterback in Kyle Orton, and a third-rounder. So I think there was a lot of jealousy. And once you make a trade like that, you're going to give a guy a mega contract to make sure he doesn't go anywhere, and that's what happened in Chicago. So that led to more jealousy around the league. And then a few years back, under a new general manager, a guy by the name of Phil Emery, who's since been fired, he got $126.5 million as another contract extension. So again, 3 major contracts, 1 playoff victory, no championships, and I think overall he's a good quarterback. He's a quarterback that I think you can win games with. I'm not necessarily sure he's a quarterback that you win games because of, even though he's paid that way. And because of that, the fact that he hasn't lived up to expectations, because when the Bears acquired him, Zach, the Bears had a really good defense back in the day, featuring Brian Urlacher, Lance Briggs, Charles Tillman. But they thought that by making the trade for Cutler, that was the final piece. Because you remember the days of Rex Grossman and Kyle Orton. They never really had the quarterback position solidified. They felt Cutler would do that, and he never was quite the player they thought they were getting. That doesn't mean he's bad. He's just not an elite-level quarterback, and I think because of that, he takes a lot of criticism.
You know the optics of it. When you pay a quarterback a whole lot of money and then he's not producing on the field at a consistent basis and a consistent rate, people are going to start to use the word, maybe he's getting complacent. How about his work ethic from things that you're able to see?
See, I don't think Cutler's issue has ever been work ethic, and I don't think it's toughness either. You brought up that NFC Championship game in 2010, the loss to the Green Bay Packers, where Cutler was seen on that stationary bike. He tried to play through an MCL. His knee is buckling in the huddle as he's trying to talk to his teammates. He takes a shot at halftime to try and get the thing right. It just never clicked, and finally had to get pulled out by the training staff, and he got into it with the training staff because he didn't want to leave. But you know what? Football's the kind of game where no one admits injuries, at least during the game. The Bears are very secretive about that kind of stuff. So basically, everyone was left to wonder, well, if he can sit on that stationary bike, well, why isn't he in the game? And from a toughness standpoint, the hits that he's taken and the play that I've seen consistently from him from that aspect, I would never question his work ethic, never question his toughness. He's just not the type of quarterback that I want putting the ball up in the air as much as he does. And when the Bears abandon the running game, whether it's because of play calling or a team is able to stop it, that's when the issues happen, because Cutler's not afraid to put it up in the air. He trusts his arm, which is as good as any in the league, but a lot of times that leads to turnovers, and when that happens, that's when you start to see the criticism.
Wrapping up with Zach Zaidman, who does a great job covering the Bears on their sidelines, Giants and Bears, Sunday, 1 o'clock. At MetLife Stadium. I read a quote from McPhee, and sometimes you only see parts of it, and in this day and age of how our media works, they just make a big headline. McPhee said that he's going to tear the Giants' ass up this week. What happened with McPhee? Because I find it interesting when a guy that's team is 2-7 is talking a lot of smack.
That's Pernell McPhee. The record says 2-7, but he doesn't have a 2-7 attitude. He was trained in Baltimore. This is the type of player he is. He was in Baltimore when they won a championship, and that's the weird thing about the Bears. They have a unique mix of veterans, guys who have won championships, like Pernell McPhee and Tracy Porter, the veteran corner, Danny Trevathan, who won a title last year with the Denver Broncos, Jarrell Freeman, a high-efficiency player that came over from the Indianapolis Colts, and Akeem Hicks, a very talented defensive lineman who played with the New England Patriots last year. But you have that mix with a whole bunch of players who haven't achieved much in the NFL, a bunch of unknown players, especially in the secondary. And I think because of that, you have the leaders of the defense. And the Bears believe they're a very good defensive team. And the reason they believe that is McPhee missed nearly half the season because he was on the PUP list with a knee injury. Their first-round pick, Leonard Floyd, who the Giants wanted, Bears traded above them in the first round to pick him. He's been an ascending player of late as he's come back from a knee injury. And a calf and a hamstring, so he's fine now. And the Bears can get after the quarterback. They're tied for 8th in the league in sacks, and that's with many of their players being banged up. And now they feel they're a healthy unit. So they feel they can get after the QB, and that's just their attitude. Last year, Pernell McPhee and Lamar Houston, a fellow linebacker, talked some smack in regards to Aaron Rodgers, and they backed up their words. They went to Lambeau Field when no one thought the Bears would win on Thanksgiving, and they picked up a victory. So maybe he's just doing that to fire everybody else up on that defense, but he was not misquoted. There was no misunderstanding. That is exactly how he feels. Maybe it's a Mississippi State Ole Miss thing. Eli Manning went to Mississippi. Pernell McPhee went to Mississippi State. I repeated the words that you just said to me to Eli Manning in a conference call earlier this week, and Manning didn't skip a beat. He just basically said Pernell's a very talented player. So you have a feeling there's going to be a little bit of smack talk on the field when these two meet.
Yeah, the complete antithesis, because Eli, he's not a loquacious fellow being a quarterback. He just finds a way to go on some clutch drives. And Eli's offense this year, I know that the Bears could get after the quarterback. We all know that. And this Giants offensive line doesn't allow a lot of sacks. But this Giants offensive line, even though they don't let the quarterback get hit that much and taken down from a sack, they're really not that great of an offensive line unit. The run game has been abysmal up until last week, where they finally generated some success on the ground. With the Giants, it all starts with taking away Odell Beckham Jr. Just from an outsider that doesn't get to see the Giants as much as we do. After Odell Beckham Jr., what are the points of emphasis to try to stop this Giants attack?
Well, I think the number one thing is you got to make sure that the Giants don't resuscitate a running game that has had some issues most of this season, because I believe you earn the right to rush the passer, Zach. So if you allow that team to be able to run the ball, then it doesn't matter the issues with the offensive line, because then you can create a sense of balance and you have the defense out of whack. So I think the issue going in is going to be to stop the running game, because the Bears' best run stopper, Eddie Goldman, the second-year player out of Florida State, has been dealing with injuries all year. Came back last week. Doug Martin against the Bears could not get the rushing attack going, but he got hurt in the middle of the game, and you saw Jameis Winston just flying around and making plays for the Buccaneers. You don't want the Giants to get into that type of a situation, because the Bears' secondary is very weak. So they need their pass rush to make some hay against the Giants. But the only way to do that is to make sure that the Giants are one-dimensional. So I think that, to me, is the big key. You don't want to give those receivers time to make plays against the Bears secondary, because they'll get open. When you got a quarterback like Eli Manning, he's got the ability to find those receivers.
Zach, Robbie Gould going to play the Bears, and we know how much Robbie Gould did mean to that Bears organization for 10 years. Just what are the Bears players saying about Robbie and them now going up against him on Sunday?
You know, spoke to the guys that he's closest to this week, Pat O'Donnell, the punter, and the long snapper, Patrick Scales. They miss him. You know, at the time that Robbie Gould was let go, right before the start of the regular season this year, he had been the longest active tenured Bear on the club. The last link to their last Super Bowl visit in the 2006 season. But, you know, Gould to me is as steady as ever. I guess there was some sort of clash with the coaching staff, which is new. John Fox, Jeff Rogers, the special teams coordinator. So he hadn't built equity with this staff and missed a couple of key kicks last year. But, you know, Robbie Gould is as good as they come in the NFL in terms of being good people and just a very clutch-type kicker. And you can see that. He's been perfect since joining the Giants. I don't believe the Bears replaced him with a better kicker in Connor Barth, but they replaced him with a kicker that this coaching staff had more trust in. I know privately this means a lot to Robbie Gould. He'll never say that publicly, but, you know, for it to really make matters happen, it would have to be one of those deals where the game comes down to a field goal. And I just don't get the feeling that come Sunday, the Bears and Giants, that game's going to come down to a field goal.
Yeah, I do agree with you. Zach, before we let you run, just because you're in the thick of the NFC North, and that's been a division, I still don't know who's going to win it. But one team that I'm so surprised with, they're an enigma to me this year, has been the Green Bay Packers. There's a report out there today, and it's ugly off the field for Aaron Rodgers, that he's cut off his family. He skipped his grandfather's funeral. So a lot going on with Aaron Rodgers, if that report is true. Just what's going on with the Packers? Because I don't get it. I thought this team was going to the Super Bowl this year, and they're a game under 500.
You know, I think there are a lot of people that are surprised at how things have kind of fallen apart here for the Packers. But to me, yeah, there's all the off-the-field stuff. But you know what? On any NFL roster, there are always going to be off-the-field issues that people have to deal with, whether it's family, friends, people's private lives. That's just regular life. We all have to deal with that. I think when I look at the Packers and you look at why they've struggled this year, injuries have been a major issue. I don't think Rodgers has been the same player ever since he was planted into the turf by Shea McClellan of the Bears a few years ago and suffered that broken collarbone. You know, the fact that they're trying to incorporate different receivers into the mix, their offensive line has been in flux. There's no balance with their running game. But from a defensive standpoint, it's just an old team. And I think they're relying on Rodgers to do too much. As good as Tom Brady is, the Patriots are a very talented team, and they're a well-balanced team in a lot of different areas. I think when you lose balance as a football team, as, say, what's happened in New Orleans with Drew Brees, and that's what's happening right now with the Green Bay Packers, that's why they've struggled a little bit. Their drafts of late haven't brought the kind of talent that we've become accustomed to seeing in Green Bay, and to me, that's the reason they're struggling. But again, you look at the NFC North. Right now, Detroit has been the hot team, but I don't look at the Lions and say, that's the team that you got to circle and say they're the best team.
Who wins
the
it?
Vikings seem to be, right? The Vikings are a team falling apart right now because of injuries. So I just think I always go with the best quarterback, and to me, the best quarterback is still Aaron Rodgers. Before all is said and done, I think the Packers will jump up and win that division.
Oh, wow. Okay, that would definitely be surprising. Zach, a great job out of you today. Thanks so much. Enjoy your trip here to New Jersey and have some fun. Appreciate the time.
You got it, always.